Hi guys, and welcome back to The Property Hustle. Before I go any further with this video, make sure you click the subscribe button below and click the bell icon as well so you can get notifications every time I post. So as promised in last week's video, today I'm going to be discussing the rent-to-rent strategy. It's a property investment strategy that's used by a lot of newbie investors because it doesn't require that much capital up front, not like when you're buying a property outright. Rent-to-rent, in simple terms, is when you rent a property from a landlord, a whole property, and then you rent out the rooms on an individual basis. So let's take, for example, a 4-bedroom house in Zone 3, London. To make things simple, let's say the property, the rent for the property as a whole is £1,000 a month. Now you approach the landlord and you ask them, you say, look, I'm going to rent the property from you and I'm going to manage it on your behalf. And I'll be renting out the rooms on an individual basis to professionals. The landlord agrees, you pay them £1,000 a month and you do the necessary research and you find out, let's say, that each of the rooms could go for £600 per calendar month. So you rent out those 4 rooms, that's 6 times 4, which is 24, so you'd be getting £2,400 per calendar month rental income from the property. Now, you obviously have to pay the landlord £1,000, so you will then be getting a net income of £1,400, which is not bad for a property that you don't even own. So that is the rent-to-rent strategy in a nutshell. Now, a lot of people choose it, like I said, because it doesn't require that much capital up front. In fact, like, there are some rent-to-rent properties that, you know, depending on the conversation that you have with the landlord might agree to give you a rent-free period, so you don't have to pay rent up front. That will give you time to fill up the rooms, and then you'll get the rental income from the tenants, and then you can go ahead and pay the landlord. Now, that doesn't happen in every single situation, but it's up to you to negotiate a deal that works for both you and the landlord. Now, a lot of the common questions asked, actually there's 2 main questions that people ask. One, is this not subletting? Well, technically it is, but I think subletting has a very negative connotation to it, because when people think subletting, they think of, you know, tenants like sneakily getting more people to come and join them and, like, you know, making money off a property without letting their landlord know. But this is all above board. The landlord is aware of what's going on. They sign a management agreement with you. Their mortgage provider should know what's going on, and so should their insurance provider. So it's all above board, contracts are signed and everything. So it's subletting because technically you are subletting, but it's completely legal. The second question that a lot of people ask is, why the hell would a landlord give you their property if essentially they could do it for themselves and make that same money? You have to remember that being a landlord, and this is something that I've learned since being a landlord myself, it's not an easy job, especially if, let's say, you don't live in the area or you just got too many properties for you to handle. It's a lot to manage properties. Now, people say, okay, well, they could just hand it off to a managing agent, but if you're going to do that, a managing agent's going to take 12% cut of the rental income. Now, what we are doing, or if you choose to do the rent-to-rent strategy, what you're saying to the landlord is, look, I know that you're stressed. You don't want to deal with the hassle of tenants. You don't want to deal with the hassle of managing your property. Let me pay you rent. So you are guaranteeing the landlord rent on a monthly basis. So he doesn't have to deal with void periods. He doesn't have to vet tenants. He doesn't have to do any of that. So you're guaranteeing him that. Now, as a landlord, that sounds like a pretty good deal, and you're not even asking to be paid. All you're asking is, in fact, you're not asking anything. You're just asking to manage their property. So it's kind of like a win-win situation. So yes, you know, there are some landlords that prefer to do everything themselves and manage it themselves, but there are other landlords who could care less. Like, they just want their regular monthly income. So don't be discouraged. Don't think, oh, you know, nobody's going to go for that. You know, how can you build a business off of rent to rent? I can tell you right now, there are people that are running very successful rent to rent portfolio businesses. And I think the great thing about rent to rent, and the reason why a lot of people go for it, is because once you have a property on a rent to rent agreement with the landlord, you could use different models on that property. So you could run it as just an HMO, which is a house of multiple occupation. So you just rent out the rooms individually, you know, on regular ASTs with individual tenants. Or some people choose to run their rent to rent properties as serviced accommodation. So using things like Airbnb and Booking.com to let the rooms out on a nightly basis. But you have to remember, with serviced accommodation, there's a lot more management issues involved with it, because every time a tenant checks out, you have to send in a cleaning team, you have to change the bedding, and you know, it's a whole palaver. So if you want to go down the serviced accommodation route with a rent-to-rent property, that's all very well and good, but you really have to have the right systems in place. So the rent-to-rent strategy is definitely a good one to get started with. Sometimes it requires zero capital, but more often than not, you're going to need to put at least a few grand up. So for things like, let's say the property isn't furnished, you'll need to furnish the property. That might cost you, I don't know, £1,000, £2,000. If you're getting the property through an estate agent, the estate agent might want you to pay certain fees and stuff. So I would say budget anywhere between 5 and 10 grand to get your first rent-to-rent property off the ground. Now, when you think about it, that's a lot less capital required than you would pay on a deposit for, let's say, a house. Because, for example, the house that I have in Nottingham, that deposit I paid about 17,500. Now that's just for one property that's earning me £500 per calendar month. Whereas with a rent to rent, this one that I actually, what did I pay up front for this one? I didn't pay anything up front. It was all furnished. I just paid the month's rent straight up front, which was £550. And then I found a tenant within 3 days, and that was that. So obviously this is one unique property and it's only a 1-bedroom property. If you were dealing with a 4-bed property, you might require a lot more money up front. You know, it's all very dependent. But essentially what I want you guys to take away from this video is that rent to rent does work as a strategy. And if you find yourself a rent to rent property, you can run it as various things. You could do an HMO, you can do a single let, you could do serviced accommodation. So there's so many things that you can do with a rent-to-rent property. So I would definitely urge you to read up a bit more about it if you're interested. Next week I will be doing a video on exactly how to go about getting your first rent-to-rent property. So yeah, that's it for today's video. I hope you found it useful and I've maybe answered some of your questions. If you have any questions regarding rent to rent, please put them in the comment section below and I will aim to answer them in next week's video. Unfortunately, that is it for this video. I hope you found it useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for new content every Sunday. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.